Hello, good afternoon, evening, maybe good morning for depending where you are. Hello, everyone. I'll wait a few seconds while everyone settles in, and then we'll make a start. We have different audiences today. Some of you are on Zoom. If you're on Zoom, you know who you are. But we're also streaming this on various platforms, so you may be watching us on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on X, Twitter, whatever. Anyway, wherever you are, welcome. Okay, everyone settled in, hopefully. You've got your popcorn ready to to watch. Um, I won't keep you long. My name is Stephen, and I'm with you for the next 45 minutes or so, depending on how many questions you have, to introduce the Real Python for Beginners course. So I'll focus on two things really, the format of the course and the content of the course. Now, this is a course for beginners. So I'll define what beginners is in a bit. I know it seems obvious, but there are usually two types of beginners. So I'll tell you this course is for both types. But if you are an experienced Python programmer, you've been programming for a long time and you feel like you're very proficient, this is not the course for you. We are running an intermediate course as well. So if that's more relevant or suitable, then there's another course. But today, in this session, I'll be talking about the Python for Beginners course. We have started there, so let's go to, there we go, we have started. In this session, I am mostly talking to you, but I want you to also ask me questions. I have a few things I want to say to sort of give you an overview of the course, but really I'm here to answer your questions. So wherever you are, if you're on Zoom, you can ask in the chat, or those of you on Zoom, if you want, you can even raise your hand and use your voice and speak. That's perfectly fine. Those of you who are watching on some other platform, on most of them, you can comment where you are, and I should be able to see your comments. On some platforms, that doesn't work. Don't ask me why. So if you ever see me look to my left, it's because I've got my second screen there. I'll keep an eye on the chats. Ask questions at any point you want. I'll have plenty of time for questions throughout the session, including at the end, but don't wait till the end. Just ask the questions whenever you need. I'll keep an eye on them, and then from time to time, I'll sort of pause from what I'm doing and answer your questions. Okay, you're here to find out more about the Python for Beginners course, not to find out about me. So I'm going to keep my introduction very brief, but I'm going to tell you a bit on who I am because this is a live course I'm talking about. I'll be the one running the course. I'm also the one who designed the course. So it probably is relevant for you to know a bit on sort of my journey and to know who you'll be spending time with if you decide to do this course. So I'm Stephen, as you see on my name, if my face is available. And I used to be a scientist. So my first life, I was a physicist, and that's where I learned my programming. So I come to programming from the science route. I used it for simulation, for data analysis, all that stuff. And then about 10, 12 years ago, I sort of moved on and I focused on Python, specifically Python education. So I've spent over a decade writing about Python, teaching Python, creating books and articles and what have you about Python. I taught all levels, beginners, intermediate, more advanced, more specific, sort of data science and everything, and all ages, from children all the way to sort of all ages. So, so I spent quite a bit of time in the Python, teaching Python and talking about Python and all of that. In 2024, I joined Real Python to set up and run these live courses. So these are relatively new to Real Python. Those of you who are familiar with Real Python, some of you may already be. You're beginners, so maybe you haven't done much Python yet. But if you do, once you start Googling any Python thing on Google or any other search engine, you're very likely to find the Real Python article come up as one of the first hits. So if you're not familiar with Real Python, you will be, whatever route you take. So if you are, you've probably seen the written articles. You may have come across the video courses, but as of last year, Real Python started running these live courses. So a different format, a different way of talking about Python. And the aim for today is to find out whether, for you to find out whether this course, the format and its contents, are what you are looking for at this stage in your journey. Because maybe it is, maybe it isn't, and that's perfectly fine. So that's my aim for today. So the aim of this course, I'm going to describe the course, and really I'm going to start by giving you the principles we followed in designing this course. We wanted something that is flexible, but still thorough. That's really important for everything we do with Real Python. What do I mean by flexible? This is not one of those courses where you have to give up everything else you're doing and focus only on this course and nothing else, with just enough time to eat and go to sleep. This is not one of those courses. We designed this course so that it fits with your current activities, work or study or whatever else you might be doing. Of course, there's still a time commitment involved. I'll talk about this and I'll tell you what expectations to have in terms of how much time to dedicate to it. But this is the course designed to fit as much as possible around your existing commitments, whatever they might be. However, it's not a self-led course in the sense that I am there guiding you throughout the whole 8 weeks, day by day. And I'll give you a good idea of what the days will look like as we go through these 8 weeks. But having an instructor there guiding you means that there's someone to guide you, first of all. There's someone to ask questions to and to have discussions with. That's really important. Sometimes with self-learning, the problem is you have a question and whom do you ask? You think you've understood something, but how can you check? That's what my role is throughout these 8 weeks, one of my roles. I'm also there in some ways for those who need it to give some accountability. Sometimes it's hard to keep going. You start learning something, but then other stuff comes in the way. Whereas here with an 8 week course where every day the whole group is moving from one topic to the next and I'm there making sure that happens, some people find that accountability really useful and the motivation. There are others learning along with you. It's more motivating than doing it just by yourself. So those are the design principles of this course. Okay, let me start now with, as I mentioned, two things. The format of the course. This is really important because if the format does not work for you, then it doesn't. But if it does, then that's a good sign. It's a good tick. You might this might be the right thing for you. I'll start with the format, then I'll talk about content later on and what I mean by beginners. Let me move to a different screen to do this. And, oops, there we go. Now, I don't like PowerPoint slides, so instead of doing a PowerPoint slide, I'm going to write notes as I go along. So I'm going to start focusing on the format of this course. So what I'll do is I'll give you the key bullet points, sort of the snapshot of what really do you need to know about this course. I'll go through them quickly, and then I'll go through them again with a bit more detail. A reminder, if you have questions at any point, type them in the chat or wherever you are, and I'll keep an eye on them and I'll make sure that if I haven't answered them, naturally, I'll focus on your questions. Good. What do you need to know about the format of the course? First of all, how long is it? It's an 8-week course. I'll tell you in a bit why 8 weeks fits well for the sort of course we're running. Now, that's how much commitment you need in terms of weeks. How about how much commitment you need in terms of every day? And it's roughly a 2 hours commitment each weekday of the course. So it's a Monday to Friday course. On the weekend, we might carry on the discussions, but the content runs Monday to Friday for 8 weeks. Now, it's about, I should probably say they're about 2 hours, right? So it's not exactly 2 hours. Why? Because some days might be a bit longer, some days might be a bit shorter. Also, it depends. Some people go quicker through material, some people go a bit slower. So I'll tell you a bit more on what to expect on these days and what these 2 hours might look like. They're not the same every day. So I'll come back to this in a bit. What's next? Oh, did I want to do it there? No, let's carry on there, I think. There. We will have, and this is such an important part of this course, that this is a live course. It's not all live. These 2 hours, as we'll see later, I'll tell you how they're quite flexible, but we'll also be meeting live. This is an important part of the course. We have 3 live sessions every week. In a few minutes, I'll expand on what these sessions look like and how they're a bit different from each other. But 3 times a week, throughout the whole 8 weeks, we'll be meeting live. That's where we're going to have our chats, discussions, understand things, dive deeper, etc., etc. 10 students per group. Small groups are important. You'll see as I go along, the type of course we want to have is one where we're talking a lot, interacting a lot. We cannot have large groups. So it's 10 groups. 10 students per group rather. And finally, I'm going to write this here. I'll tell you more about the forum. The forum, I think, is such an important part of this course. It's the glue that binds everything together. So, in a nutshell, those are the key points you need to know about the course. Now, let me go through them again and I'll expand a tiny bit. I'll keep everything brief, but then feel free to ask me questions and we can go, I can talk more about anything you like me to through your questions. Now, this course, it's a course for beginners, and I'll define what I mean by beginners in a bit when I talk about the content. We want to cover quite a bit of material, which is why we don't want it to be a 1 or 2 week course. This is not a full-time course. You're fitting this material with other things you're doing. So a short course would simply not allow us to cover much. However, sometimes you see courses where it feels like whoever designed the course is on a mission to tick as many topics as possible. This is not one of those courses. I think we want to cover quite a bit, but we also want to have enough time to digest every topic, to let it brew a bit and to discuss it, work on examples, and have those conversations around it. And 8 weeks seems to be like I'm not going to say the magic number, but it seems like a good time span to tick both of those boxes, to cover quite a bit of material, but to also allow time to discuss that material, to discuss work on it, work on projects. You see that there are lots of mini projects in this course, and then there's also a larger project later on. So we want to have enough time to not just whiz through topics, but to properly understand them. I'll come to your question, Steve, in a bit. So I've seen it there. Now, every day of the course, I've curated material for each and every one of the 40 days of the course, 8 weekdays, 8 weeks, 4 weekdays. That's 40 days. And I've curated material from the Real Python, from the existing Real Python resources. So every day you'll have a collection of material on a certain topic, of course. Some of it will be reading material, some of it will be video courses, you'll have exercises to work on. And that's what a typical day looks like. Not every day is like that, but content. And that's where the flexible part comes in, because this daily content, you can go through it at any point of the day that suits you. Early morning before you take the dog for a walk, lunchtime, after dinner, whatever part of the day is best for you, or you can split it across different parts of the day. That's where the flexibility comes in. However, this is not a self-led course. So even though a part of the content you'll be doing in your own time, we'll also be talking a lot live. And that's where the 3 live sessions come in, 3 a week. 2 of them are Q&A sessions. And these are 60 minutes each, 60 minutes each. Sometimes longer, because sometimes we keep on, there are more questions to discuss. But and as the name says, these are sessions where there's no agenda. I don't come with a set number of topics to discuss. You ask the questions. And why is this relevant? Because as you're going through your material, you will have questions. In fact, those of you who've done any self-learning, whether it's Python or something else, you know that self-learning is great, but sometimes you have a question, you want to ask that question. You want to make sure you've understood something. That's where the Q&As come in. And I often like to call these Q&A and D. The D is for discussion, because it's very rarely, or it's never, you ask a question, I give you an answer. It's very much you ask a question, and then we have a discussion as a group, dive deeper, sort of meander through the topics, and that's what gives us a really good, solid understanding. So the answer comes out of that discussion, but the discussion is more important than just the dry answer. So these are Q&As, but plenty of discussions. Notice that 2 of the 3 sessions are Q&As, because I think it's such an important part of this course. You come up with questions, and often the best discussions are the ones that come from your questions. Then those are Monday and Friday. The Wednesday session is a 90 minutes. This is sort of a more structured session. So this is a bit more like a classic lesson, if you like, although it's still informal. We're still going to have lots of discussions, but this is where either I'll introduce a new topic, one that we haven't covered in any of this material, or some topics you've covered, but we'll look at it in a different perspective or dive a bit deeper or work on examples or a bit of all of those. So the 90-minute structured session a week will be proper content. The other two sessions are Q&As with still proper content, but it's driven by you. You ask those questions. That means every week we have 3.5 hours together live. The live aspect is really important, I think. I think it's where a lot of the understanding happens. Here is where you get to know the stuff. In the live sessions, it's where you really understand it and you know, yeah, I got that. Or, oh, I'm not sure I got that yet. So let's have a discussion about it. Good. So plenty of live sessions. I'll say more about live sessions in a bit. There might be some questions as well. Now, the key part in all of the live sessions, whether it's Q&As or the structured lesson, is that the groups are small. So this leads me to the 10 students per group. Unlike this session where I am talking to you and it's very much a one-way, of course, you will ask questions, which you're already doing. The sessions in the course will be very different. It will be a smaller group. We'll all be seeing each other. You see me, but I see you as well. I often like to say it's a bit like we're sitting in a real room around a real table drinking a real cup of coffee. We're not, of course. We're in different parts of the world on Zoom, but the tone and the style is let's sit around the table and have a chat, have a discussion. So asking questions, having small groups means that we can have those discussions. There are no barriers to asking questions. There are, well, fewer barriers at least. There are fewer barriers to saying, oh, did I understand this correctly? It's important to have those discussions, and that's why we want them to be small groups. And as I've mentioned earlier, the forum is the glue that binds everything together. So the forum is there 24/7. I do go to sleep sometimes, so I'm not necessarily there when I'm asleep, but in my waking hours, I'm there checking on messages. And the forum is where the conversation can keep going throughout the whole 8 weeks. So as you're going through the material, I mentioned earlier, you will have questions. You will definitely have questions. And there are two things you can do with those questions. In fact, you can do both of them as well. One of them we've seen already. Write it down somewhere, and then at the next Q&A, bring it up and say, here's my question. Can we discuss this? Or the moment you have the question, you can go to the forum and post it straight away. And we'll start the discussion straight away. And of course, we can do both. In fact, often there might be questions on the forum, and at some point I say, this is best to discuss live. Let's discuss it on Monday, on Friday, whenever our next Q&A is. I will post some additional content on the forum, often giving my perspective on topics. You will be working on examples, so you can post your code and we can have discussions about your code. It's a very informal place, but it's where we can keep the conversation going, keep the discussions going throughout the whole 8 weeks. We don't just have to wait for the live sessions. We can get the conversations going all the time. So that is, there are a few more things I'll add and I'll have a look at your questions in a second, but that's pretty much the format. And I focus on the format because it needs to work for you. It needs to be a format that you think, yeah, I can fit that in my schedule. That works great for me. Not every format works for everyone. So hopefully this works for you. Let me have a look at a couple of questions. A reminder, please do send your questions at any point you want. What time of day is live session? I'll come to that, Steve, in a couple of minutes once I finish with these questions. I'll move to talking about the content and I'll show you a page where you'll see the session times. Is there a limit to the number of students in cohort? Yes. These are small groups. You may have asked the question before I got to this, 10 students per group. So each group is going to be small. We'll be running two separate groups, but each group is 10 students. So we want to keep these small groups because the discussion, the conversation, asking questions is a really important part of this course. Okay. If there are more questions, please do send them. I'll keep an eye on my screen on the left. I'll come back to this. There are probably a few more things I want to add here, but let me move to the content. And I'm actually going to post a link to the page that I'm going to show you on my screen. And for some of you on X or LinkedIn, you might not have seen the post I've sent, so I'll tell you what it is in a second. Let me move to this webpage. So Those of you who've seen the link pop up, you don't need a link now because I'll show you on my screen. For those who didn't see the link, if you go to realpython.com/live, so /live, realpython.com, you'll find two links. Python for Beginners will bring you to this page. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to take you very quickly through the content of the course. Now, first of all, this is a course for beginners. And I did tell you there are two definitions of beginners. You might think, well, beginner is beginner. Experience tells me that there are two types of people who come on this course, and this course is suitable for both. Those who are absolute beginners. Maybe some of you have never done any Python before. You've never done any programming before. You're starting from absolute zero. And that this course is suitable for you. You'll see that week one is starting with the basics. There is no prior knowledge we're assuming in this course. So if you have never done any programming at all, this is perfectly fine. We will start from the basics. Some of you might be thinking, well, that's not quite me. I have sort of started learning Python before once or twice. I've learned some of the basics. So I'm not an absolute zero beginner, but I'm still a beginner. I still want to really make sure I get the fundamentals right before I move on. And this course is also for you. Of course, you will find some things are a revision of things you've done, but that in a sense is a good thing because you may have covered some topics, but do you know whether you've really understood them? And one thing that I focus a lot on in this course is to make sure that we really understand not just how to do things, not just how to do things. I struggle to get those words out, but also why we do things the way we do. The why is an important question for me as well. So for those of you who've done some of the basics, yes, some of it will be a revision, but you might find that even with the topics you're reviewing, you'll end up getting to understand them at a deeper level. And that's really important for us to really start putting things together. So whichever type of beginner you are, this course is suitable for you. If you have done lots of Python before, then you're probably not a beginner. One thing I'll mention now before I start going through the content, I'll try to answer as many of your questions in this session. But if some of you are still not sure whether your level and the course's level match, you're more than welcome to contact me after the session. Those of you on Zoom, you'll get an email from me because I have your emails. Those of you watching on any of the streaming platforms, you can either find my personal account or the Real Python account, contact Real Python directly and say, can you link me up with Stephen? We've had a chat with him. And I'm happy to have discussions with any of you if you're not entirely sure after the session. Good. So let me quickly take you through an overview of the content. Now, if you're an absolute beginner, you've never done programming before, none of these words will make sense. So I'm going to spare you reading them, right? It doesn't really make sense. I'm going to just go for high level. Week one, we start from the basics. I said no prior knowledge is needed. So in week one, we're going to start with the fundamental building blocks that you need for any type of coding. You cannot do any programming whatsoever without some of these fundamentals. And we'll cover some of them or many of them in week one. So week one is getting started pretty much. One thing you'll notice is that every week you'll see these mini projects. This is really important for me, for the course, because understanding, learning the topics is important. But that leaves you with lots of bits of the jigsaw. You want to put the jigsaw pieces together, and that you can only get from projects. So we will have mini projects throughout the first 6 weeks. I'll tell you why 6, not 8. And they will sort of run through in parallel. So we'll learn stuff and then we'll work on a mini project. As you can imagine, the mini project in week one will be using the topics we've been covering in week one, etc., etc. So that's my week one. Now, there was a question earlier, what are the times of the sessions? And on this page, you can see that every week you can see the dates of the sessions. They're always Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. The times shown here will be shown in your time zone. So here I'm based in the UK, so it's showing me the times in my time zone. If you go to this page, this is the page I've shared with you, or if you go to realpython.com/live, click on Python for Beginners, you'll get to this page. So to know the session times, look at those times, but look at it on your browser, not on mine, unless you're in the UK, in which case it'll be the same. You only need to be available for one of these time slots. So there's group one or group two, you're going to pick one of them. So you don't need to be available for both of them. In fact, you can see they're quite spread apart. The idea is that hopefully one of them suits you in your time zone and how it works in your day. So have a look at these times on your browser, and that will tell you the times in your time zone. Okay, week two, we then start to talk about another important topic in Python. And often we write programs because we want to replace tasks that we as humans find boring or are too time consuming. And often that includes lots of repetition. Python programs often repeat stuff over and over again. And therefore learning how to do that repetition, that iteration, the fancy word, is really important. So in week two, we'll focus on that. There are many ways we can repeat a chunk of code depending on the needs. We'll also start talking about how we store data in our program. Storing information is really important in any computer program. And I often think of this as you're storing things in a box, and depending on what object you have, you need to have different types of boxes. And lists is one of the most important data types, as we call them, the most important structures we use to store data in. So we'll cover that in week two. You can see there's another mini project here, and now we're going to be using topics from week one and from week two, of course. So the mini projects start to get a bit more complex as the weeks go by, because we have more topics we've learned. Week three, we move on to another really important topic, functions in programming. If you compare Python, which is a programming language, to a human language, spoken, written language, functions are the equivalent of verbs. Verbs are the actions of a language, and functions are those things in programming that do something. They're a way of enclosing a block of code that does one thing, enclosing it within this unit, which we call a function, and then you can reuse it over and over again. So we'll learn about how to define functions, how to use them, and this is such an important topic that we need to get a good solid grounding of functions. And once again, a mini project to help us along the way. I talked about lists in week two. This is one way of storing information. There are many others. And in week four, we're going to focus on some of these other data structures, different boxes, if you like, to store different types of data. We'll also start to get a sense of how Python does things a bit different from other languages. Now, you may not have any experience with other languages, but we still want to know the Python philosophy. So we'll talk about this strangely named principle called duck typing. We have some strange names for things in programming, but this will all make sense. More mini projects, as you can see. Now, week five, we're introducing a topic called object-oriented programming. Now, some of you may never have heard of this before. Some of you may have heard of object-oriented programming. And often this is considered, it's not always considered a beginner's topic. Sometimes it's a bit of an intermediate topic. So why did I choose to put this topic in a beginner's course? And there are two main reasons why I've done this. Firstly, object-oriented programming is a style of programming. The fancy word is it's a paradigm. Again, fancy words. It's a style of programming that's really important in modern programming. Some people love it, some people hate it. It doesn't matter whether you love it or hate it. It's there. You need to know about it. It's an essential part of modern programming. So although it's an intermediate topic, it's good to have an introduction to it early on. That's one of the reasons why I'm introducing this in a beginner's course. But there's a second reason, and that's that Python, the language, is actually built on top of object-oriented principles. So once you start digging a bit underneath the surface of Python, once you start seeing what's happening behind the scenes, object-oriented programming principles start to come in. Therefore, having an idea of the basics of this topic will allow us to understand Python, the language, much better. So those are the two reasons why I'm introducing object-oriented programming just an introduction to it. This is a topic we could spend 8 weeks just talking about it and not cover everything. So it's just an introduction to this topic. And week 6, we talk a bit more about object-oriented Python, and then we talk about debugging, because programming is one of those honest professions which says, look, we make mistakes. We're not going to pretend we don't make mistakes. No matter how proficient you become in programming, you will always make mistakes, or you'll always have bugs in your program. The type of bugs will be different. As you become more experienced, you make different bugs. You'll introduce different bugs in your code. And therefore, the act of finding these errors, these bugs, understanding them and fixing them is an important part of coding. And that's what we call debugging. We'll start talking about some principles of debugging in our week 6. Now, I mentioned earlier that weeks 1 to 6 are different from week 7 and 8. Weeks 1 to 6 are where we're covering the material. Plenty of material so far, many projects as we go along to consolidate everything we're learning. Week 7 and 8 are dedicated exclusively to one project. So here we're going to have a project lasting 2 weeks. In week 7 and 8, we're not going to add new content. We're going to use the stuff we've learned in weeks 1 to 6, but we're going to start bringing them all together into one larger project. And this does a number of things. It helps us consolidate and review all the things we've learned in weeks 1 to 6. But it also helps us start to bring them together. We have lots of moving parts. We've learned about lists and functions and all these topics. In a project, we need to bring them together so that they all work together. So there's a different level of learning here. It's how to bring all the bits together. How do you decide which tools to use, where to use them, what style of coding do you use? So the last 2 weeks will allow us to explore not just the topics we've learned, but how to build projects and how to tackle problems in programming. And that's going to be week 7 and week 8. And that brings us then to the end of our course. There's plenty happening in this course. It's 8 weeks, but it's 8 weeks packed with content. So you will be working hard, I promise you that. Now, that brings me more or less to the end of the key things I wanted to mention. So what I'll do is, if you have any questions, please do pose them. I'll do a quick recap. There are maybe 1 or 2 more things I wanted to mention that I forgot earlier. I mentioned them now. But I'm now happy to sort of focus on any questions you might have and stay as long as I need to answer your questions. I'll repost the link. In terms of all the logistics into costs, how to book, times, dates, etc., they are all on the page I'm showing you, which I'm posting again there. So in terms of all the relevant details, dates, cost, how to book, etc., feel free to have a look there. And on any technical aspects of it, feel free to contact also Real Python directly if it's on how to book, etc. Something is not working there, but it should be all straightforward. Let me jump back to my review page. Well, if my computer, it's late in the day here, my computer is giving up. There we go, we got there. So what I'll do is I'll review the key points, add 1 or 2 things I didn't mention before, and then keep going if you have any questions, and answer those questions. One thing I did not mention, 2 things actually that often are asked that I didn't mention. The live sessions are recorded. Now, it's best to attend live because I think the live interaction is such an important aspect of this course. But stuff happens, right? A work meeting is, you get a last minute work meeting that coincides with the course, even though you had asked to have it free, or some personal thing which keeps you away on a certain day. So if you have to miss a session or part of a session, the live sessions are all recorded so you can catch up with them. Or sometimes we've had the discussion and you think, there's plenty to get from that discussion. Let me listen to it again. So you might want to go and listen to a part of a session again. So ideally, join the sessions live, but if you have to miss one or part of a session, they are recorded. And you will also have access to the recordings after the 8 weeks as well. So it's not just for the duration of the 8 weeks. Everything you get in the course, you keep forever. This includes all the content. You have the daily content that you're going to go through day by day. Even the forum. At the end of the course, we export the forum and we give you a copy of it so that all those conversations we've had throughout the 8 weeks, you have a permanent record of them. I've shown you the two session times already. Let me, in fact, I'll jump back to that page in a bit. So quick reminder, first of all, I'm also aware that some of you may have joined later in this session. So this is a course for beginners, either absolute beginners, or maybe you've done some of the basics, but you want to really consolidate your fundamentals before you move on. It's an 8-week course. There's stuff happening every weekday. The main content that we're the new stuff that we're learning is stuff that you can do in your own time during the day, roughly 2 hours commitment a day. However, we'll also be having lots of live interaction. This includes 3 live sessions every week. 2 of them are Q&As, so plenty of time for you to ask me questions. And then a structured session. And the forum is the other place where we keep discussing things throughout the whole 8 weeks. Groups are small because the conversations, the discussions are really important. That is a quick review. And the last thing I wanted to mention, because often it's asked, let me go back to the web page I had before. These are the time slots. A reminder, these are the time slots in my time zone. If you go to this page on your browser, you'll see the times in your time zone. You only need one of these. Pick one that's available. If one of those times works for you, that's great. Should you choose the book, when you book, we'll ask you which session do you want to be in. If there are days where you can't attend the live session on your slot, there are the recordings, but it's perfectly fine to join the other session if you can. Of course, it might be at a time that's not suitable for you, right? What's 12:30 for me, it might be 3 o'clock in the morning for you. You might not want to wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning just to catch up on a session. But if you need to, we're quite flexible with that, right? So it's fine. It doesn't mean that if you're on the second session, you can never, never, never attend the first one. If you can't attend your session, we have flexibilities there. Good. Now, one more question has come in, so I'll have a look at that question. If you have any more questions, please send them to me in the chats in Zoom or on the platforms you're on. A quick reminder that some of you on some platforms, if you write underneath the post, it doesn't show up here because I'm using a software that streams onto several places. So if I haven't answered your question, it's because I haven't seen it. Get in touch with me personally, find me on social media, contact Real Python. I'm more than happy to have one-to-one conversations with you. Mahi said, is this different from having an annual subscription for Real Python? Yes, because this is a structured course with the live sessions, the live interaction in a small group. So the Real Python subscription gives you access to the whole platform, but that's a self-learning approach. This is very much a structured 8-week course led by me, where every day we're going to be moving together. You have I'm always there where you can ask me questions at any time in the live sessions on the forum. So this is very much an instructor-led course with plenty of live interaction. So that's where the difference is. Different people learn in different ways. So for some people, the self-learning approach is perfectly fine. But if you feel that extra guidance, that ability to ask questions is something you value, then that's what this course is there for. Hopefully it answers your question, Maher. Good. Now, I think I have answered all the questions. So what I'll do is I'll finish off back on this page. As a reminder, I've shared the link a couple of times on the chats, but if you haven't seen it, the easiest way to get to the page I was showing you is realpython.com/live. Then you'll find a link for Python for beginners. Another thing I should have mentioned, the next course starts on February the 2nd. So there's still a few weeks left, but we have limited spaces as well because we're only running 2 cohorts and each cohort is 10 students. So in terms of timeline, the course starts on the 2nd of February and then runs for 8 weeks, of course, as I've mentioned. A quick reminder, if you have further questions that you want to take on a one-to-one basis, contact me. I'm happy to answer your questions. We want to really make sure that this course is what you need. And if it's not, that's perfectly fine. We want to make sure we have that perfect match. So I'm happy to have chats with you if you want after the session as well. Now, what I'll do is I'll stay in the background for another minute or so. I'll wrap up here. I'll say my thank yous and goodbyes, but I'll stay in the background in case someone has a question. You might be typing it and it's like, no, 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 I want to send it. So I'll keep an eye on the chat. But if not, thank you for joining me. Any questions, let me know. Hopefully, I'll see some of you from February the 2nd, and we'll spend 8 wonderful weeks talking Python together. Thank you for joining, and goodbye.